So no pressure to speak after an amazing panel of speakers today, but also conscious that you're all sitting here and thinking about lunch coming up. So I really want to thank Amotai for inviting me along to speak today. So I'm here to talk around my supplier diversity journey. Since I've been at EY, I've been at EY for over 17 years, but I've been in this role for the last 4. I was really disappointed to not be able to make the Amotai Summit last year when I was invited, but like so many of you, I was in my 5th lockdown in Melbourne. But today, I'm just excited to look around the room, and I can't believe how many people here are in attendance. I do want to give you a little warning that this is my first public speaking appearance in person. I'm pretty used to looking at a crowd of faces that maybe do put their camera on or perhaps turn it off and choose to do something different. So just a little bit about me before I start. So I live in Melbourne with my husband and 2 children. Sadie's 10 and Jack's age 7. And we live in Melbourne in a pocket called Sea Home, and very, very lucky to be surrounded on one side by the beach and the other side the lake. And I'd love to tell you all that both my children enjoy coming for walks around the neighbourhood, but they usually choose to stay home, but we're working on that one. So as mentioned, I've worked at EY for over 17 years. I did start my career in risk and project management, and like most procurement professionals that we've already mentioned, it was an area that I fell into. After working about 2.5 years in Singapore, I was returning back to Australia with my family, and there wasn't a role for me in risk anymore. So I was really fortunate that the procurement team heard that I was coming back, and they asked me to come into the team as a procurement assistant role. So I started that in 2014, and my team was great. I loved working with the vendors and getting to know who's in the market. I was a pretty good procurement professional. Where I shined was probably more in the relationship building rather than the contracting or the tender process, which, as we've pointed out, can be a little bit tedious at times, and it wasn't something that always quite synced with me. But then in 2018, I was asked to join our Reconciliation Action Plan Committee as our procurement representative. And I didn't even know about this area of procurement. My manager had been on that team and had been, implementing the different things that were in place, but he had actually forgotten to tell us about what he was doing. And that was a pretty big oversight because it has to be a team effort. So quite quickly, I started to learn about our EY reconciliation commitment to our Indigenous communities, but also what we're doing at EY globally within our supplier diversity program. So EY's had a supplier diversity program for over 17 years, and as you would imagine, it started in the US. When I took on this role, I was for about 18 months, like most supplier diversity people. I wore 2 hats for Oceania, so procurement and then supplier diversity. But it was our participation in the design of the Business Council of Australia's Raising the Bar program that took me on a complete deep dive into the Indigenous procurement world and how we could grow our programs to create further impact. So my business case for EY to be part of the program was accepted by our ELT, and now we had to really walk the walk. We were all in, and I was fortunate to be offered the role full-time. As our global supply diversity team has grown, we're now labelled the Environmental Social Governance Services team. And my team of 9 is led by Teresa Harrison in the US, with colleagues in the US, Canada, Brazil, UK and India. And we're all part of a global supply diversity team, global supply chain services team of over 650 supply chain professionals throughout the globe. I can't be more grateful or inspired by the team I have within supply chain services and our ESGS team. Though while global, we're a pretty close team that openly share their knowledge, experience and materials, knowing that we're all working towards a common goal of shaking up a pretty traditional corporation. So as mentioned, Teresa Harrison is my leader, and she's an inspirational leader. A natural speaker and motivator, and my apprenticeship with her has given me career growth, goals and a passion that I never expected from a job. Our team has grown as more countries globally have focused on economic prosperity for all, including procurement policies that focus on social equity and value for minorities, local communities and small medium enterprises. And at EY, we're committed to serving communities of who we belong. And it's whether it's through our engagements, our client value, our procurement, and then our EY Ripples programs. Going into this role, though, and advocating for Indigenous businesses has required that I break down so much of my own procurement knowledge, really deep dive into our First Nations history and understand other ways of doing business. I've had to learn to listen and know my boundaries as a non-Indigenous person within this sector. I consult more than I've ever had to ensure that I'm meeting our obligations as a big corporation to the communities of what we work in. I consult with my First Nations colleagues and with my friends that I've met throughout this amazing community of dedicated professionals and entrepreneurs. And it's important that I have First Nations mentors that I can talk openly with, but listen as they break down challenges, barriers, and opportunities within my area of focus. The highlights always outweigh the challenges of what drive me forward each day. I don't always have good days, which I look at where I feel like I'm doing the good work. And some days you get win after win, sometimes small, and others sometimes a bit of a slam dunk. But challenges have to be viewed what it is. It's not a barrier, it's not a no. It's just up to me and my team, my wider EY community, to find a way through or perhaps around it. So I'll talk about some challenges, but then I want to move on to some highlights. So I know quite a few of you have built your own social procurement programs, whether it's government or corporate, so you can relate to the challenges of implementing change. Change management is one of the biggest skill sets you need to bring about any social change role. Changing minds, behaviours, and bringing to the surface the unconscious bias of us all. We all have unconscious bias, especially in our procurement of goods and services. And as a procurement professional, I've heard it all. You know, I don't have any issues with our current vendors, but they all know our business so well, so why would I change? You know, a bigger vendor is more reliable. And a good one I always get is, I just need a quick turnaround, Amy. I don't have time to consider a new vendor right now. But what my job as a social procurement leader is to bring innovation, diverse thinking, and new goods and services to the business. I challenge pipeline opportunities and I encourage fresh thinking in our procurement and client engagement teams. One thing I did do recently was have Crystal Kinsella, who is a leading supply diversity consultant in Australia, come and do a session on unconscious bias. My supply chain team have all had compulsory training on unconscious bias online, but with this session we felt that it really hit home. One of my teams and stakeholders really could see where they were, what's blocking their own or perhaps their teammates' purchasing decisions. And for one of my stakeholders, I could literally see the penny drop the moment she realised that one of her more difficult managers was not open to any of the Indigenous businesses I brought when I introduced them because of the familiarity he had with his incumbents. And it prevented him going to market when a contract expired. He'd either roll it over without consulting procurement, or it just remained uncontracted. Another big challenge is, of course, the size of our company. With over 11,000 partners and staff just across Oceania, it's a lot of colleagues to educate on the power of procurement as a leader to building the Indigenous economy. So this is where I really have to rely on my colleagues within the communications teams, champion networks such as our Yarning Circles and Ripples Task Force, and to help us get the message into the various teams that I know can implement change. So communication and networking also extends out of your organisation. EY are a member of the Supply Nation Leadership Roundtable, and it's given me a group of colleagues who I can discuss our roles and as well as challenges, opportunities as we all work towards a common goal of growing the Indigenous business sector. I really recommend you support Amotai and attend their events. Meet buyers or vendors who you can build up a community. Contribute where you can and host events at your own workplace, whether it's a social procurement panel, business clinics, or a matchmaker session. The highlight of my year is always the Supply Nation Conference and Trade Show. The celebration of the Indigenous business sector is bigger and bigger each year, with 1,800 participants at the trade show this year and 1,400 at the gala dinner. The success in the room is overwhelming, and this year I don't even think I got around to half the businesses that were in attendance. We're also thrilled to have our EY CEO and Deputy CEO in attendance at the gala dinner. It's not that they've not been across the event, and it's not that they're not aware of our support for Supply Nation, but this year I think after a couple of hard years with COVID, they really wanted to invest more of their time. I was also really pleased to have along with me my supply chain team, our Iwaitahi and the Indigenous sector practice colleagues, all there to support the award winners. So our CEO was really extremely interested in the trade show and the amount of people who had been in attendance. He admitted that he'd never been to a trade show before and was interested to see how it all worked. I talked him through the booths, the speakers, the entertainment, the buzz of the entrepreneurs as they start to meet potential new clients. So next year, I'll be bold and send an invite to attend the trade show, knowing that his diary is extremely tight, but I want him to feel the energy in the room and meet our vendors we've come to rely on for various parts of our service delivery. I can't emphasise as well the importance of how much leadership matters. We all know how much that important message on procurement, social procurement, is from senior leadership, and having them send the message from your organisation top down. Our global supply chain leader, Larry Phelan, provides continual support with challenges to both our policy and processes within procurement. He attends our CPO panels and they discuss the value and importance of diverse supply chain. He's also secured the ESG team a seat at the table with our regional leadership teams. Our communication styles is another area that needs to be constantly reviewed and considered. So what may work for one leader might miss the mark on for another. I've been presenting at our Oceania at ELT for a couple of years now. For a long time, I've focused on the why, the small wins, and perhaps a few asks. About 12 months ago, I moved this conversation to, so we all know the why. We should know the how. I now want the ELT to ask your partners and staff, why not? With that, our team also created a data dashboard. The ESGS we provide on a biannual basis, and we broke down that category spend. At the top, we put a picture of the supply chain leader as well as our stakeholders. Our supply chain team was all engaged to ensure they were happy with the approach, and they also reviewed and invested their time just to ensure that that really showcased the value that they bring to the business. And I think that's a really important point that's already been discussed today, of making sure procurement has that seat at the table and showing the value of what they can bring, because we often get overlooked. So with that report, we outlined the vendors used and that increase in spend, or perhaps the lack of spend, and the pipeline opportunities, and wove in the stories of our vendors and our impact. And data hits hard, especially within an accounting firm. Data also does not lie. My difficult stakeholder can't argue with it. It tells a clear story of what we're doing well and where we need to focus our efforts. But one particular challenging moment I had was only a month ago. As we're part of the Raising the Bar program, we've made a commitment to achieve 3% of our influenceable spend by 2024. We did not reach this target this year, and I felt like we'd missed a massive milestone. I felt that any increase in spend or impact we had was made all based on that one number, 87%. I had to report this one to our CEO and COO and explained why I had not achieved what I really thought we could. The worst part is that I then sat on that report for 2 weeks longer than I should have. I soon realised that I was missing time by sitting on this report and not submitting it through. I was missing part of FY23 and any momentum that I then needed to put forward some changes and big bets for the ELT to endorse. So I finalised my report and added in my recommendations on what needed to change to build out our program, but also the big bets that I proposed. The responses from our ELT has been supportive. They acknowledge we can do more, but most importantly, they realise that our opportunity to create impact and opportunity for First Nations businesses is up to everybody. Our stories will now become a series of comms by our CEO, and I meet with the COO on a quarterly basis. In those meetings, what used to be just a bit of an update, he now uses as his own next steps. He uses my dashboard for his quarterly leadership updates. He attends my senior leadership events with community to better understand his role that he has. But more importantly, he co-presents on the ELT updates. So it's no longer just me moving this forward. He's also doing the heavy lifting. Within New Zealand, our inclusion of Māori and Pacifica vendors in New Zealand has grown organically and probably with little input required from me. We're focused on understanding our current vendors to identify those that are First Nations owned My stakeholders have been able to work through their accounts payable spend and indicate whether there's any businesses perhaps that we could then work with Amotai to see if they're interested in registering and being part of this. This, of course, then allows me to identify their future opportunities for that business, to provide additional services to EY, extend contracts, or then perhaps refer on to our Tier 1 vendors. So while our spend might not be at the targeted number in Australia, the growth since we implemented a supplier diversity program in Oceania has been really strong. But as you can imagine, as a professional services firm, the opportunities to utilise First Nations businesses and consultants on our client deliverables is our largest area of focus within ESG. In Australia, our government has strong Indigenous and social procurement policies, which are weighted, contracted, reported and then measured for impact. To me, this is the best lever for EY to identify First Nations businesses for both our internal and client engagements. Our engagement teams are required to report on their spend through our large government projects, recording all spend with First Nations businesses on a regular basis with a certificate then issued at the end for completion of the project. But if we don't meet this target, this can then result in a percentage penalty for any other federal government tenders that we go for. And in New South Wales, if we don't meet the minimum 1.5% Aboriginal participation, then this amount was then withheld from our final project payment. These processes ensure that we deliver what the government want. As part of our value add, though, to our government clients, we also include in our tender response, where we do partner with Indigenous businesses, that we commit to working with our subcontractors on area of the businesses they might require assistance, whether it's mentoring, training, or access to our networks. One of our vendors has now leveraged our 7 drivers of growth, has been provided with pro bono support for a tax structure change that they required, as well as have received communications assistance from our brand marketing communications team, which resulted in an article in the Australian Financial Review on the business, as well as the CEO. It's all about our access to networks. One of our senior managers in tech consulting has enjoyed working with them so much. On the side, he's now commenced working on a strategy for future engagement, but also a business case for how EY can better invest in this business and the capability of that team to create growth. At EY, our people and our networks are our superpower. The increase in our investment in business clinics, matchmaker sessions or pitch events, mentoring, the investment by our time of our partners and staff in the Indigenous business sector is our biggest success story. In FY22, EY contributed 35,000 training hours, impacting 5,682 diverse businesses across the globe. We have highly skilled professionals and access to networks that I encourage all partners and staff at EY to consider as part of their commitment to building a better working world. We also need to always remember to celebrate success, reward and recognise that are working with you to embed the social procurement policy. Those that contribute to our mentoring or business clinics will make themselves available to diverse businesses. This could be done whether it's through your company newsletters or emails to senior leaders, or perhaps there's a company reward program that you can be utilising, or purchase an additional table at an event that you can invite these champions to and celebrate their success. I was asked if I could have a think about what you could learn from or do more or less of in New Zealand. I was kind of stuck because you're already leveraging so many lessons learnt from other supplier diversity advocates like CAMSI, MSD UK or Supply Nation. The ability to lean on our global colleagues is there, and the Global Supplier Diversity Alliance community is very strong and supportive. In May this year, a US contingent of Native American business leaders travelled to Australia to attend the Supply Nation Connect and meet with First Nations business owners and community leaders. It excites me to think of the opportunities that are available for First Nation business owners to work more closely globally, create opportunities for international export, but also potential First Nation joint ventures. I'd also encourage you to remember that it's not just up to government to advocate for change. For corporations, it's a business imperative that it's not just good to have, it's a must-have. And we need to back Amotai and other agencies who are advocating to government for a social procurement policy change. Your company's brand is powerful and you have senior leaders that may be able to provide some influence. Within Victoria, there's been a lot of discussion as to whether the social procurement policy will create a supply and demand issue for Aboriginal businesses. As the government policies broaden into a wider social procurement policy, we have to ask if government and corporates are committed to building the capability of our First Nations businesses and entrepreneurs. Do we have the programs in place with leaders and champions available to help mentor and focus on how they can grow the business and further impact our communities? When I think about what we can even drive even more success, I believe corporations need to develop entrepreneurs, and they also need to build on community relationships through internship and sponsorship opportunities to teach foundational skills, assure employee resource groups exist and have a strong voice to create impactful change, and community involvement by partnering and building trusting reciprocal relationships through mentoring and knowledge sharing. My role at EY has expanded in the last year to a more client focus as our partners start to understand that government means business in Australia. They expect to see more investment in social value. What spend or employment opportunities are we creating with each contract, and no longer just at an organisational level? It's also an opportunity for our partners and staff to understand the influence they can have as they work with each government department to further their social value objectives. And it's a powerful change to be able to influence, and I'm excited by the change I see in our teams as they understand what they can include in our client deliverables in a way that they've never actually worked before. It's an immediate and a tangible impact that we can make, and our staff at EY are excited to be able to do this within their engagements. It's an amazing movement to be part of, one that can be challenging but is impactful and emotional. You make friends and colleagues like it's unlike any other industry that I've been in before. And I'm privileged to be part of the team at EY and be part of this amazing sector of advocates and entrepreneurs. I'm constantly in awe of the output and the hard work of the team at Amotai, and I encourage buyers in the room to be bold in their strategies, run your own race, open your networks and your knowledge, and most of all, consider your impact to be your top priority. So thank you for your time.